All right. Each of our guests today is going to speak to us for about 20 to 25 minutes, or however much time they decide they need. And then we're going to have a panel discussion, a Q&A. So as they are sharing the information that they've prepared, be thinking about questions that you might have for the panel, and we might even maybe get some interaction among the guests. We'll first hear from Kelli Charlton, then from Kyle Case, then from Kenneth Lichstein, and then we'll open it up for questions. To introduce our speakers, let me first just give you a little bit of information about our first speaker, Kelli Charlton, who is the Director of Business Development for Stapley Pharmacy and the owner of Core Solutions Center, a center for active aging. As a business mentor, entrepreneur, visionary, motivator, leader, author, and public speaker, Kelli believes in paying it forward. And I can attest to this. I go down to St. George every year with students. We go down for the whole 2 weeks and do health screenings, and Kelli is there. She does a cognitive assessment and teaches the students how to administer that, and she is extremely interactive and full of energy. It's always a pleasure when she is there at the health screenings. She believes and accepts every opportunity to help those with a dream find a way to achieve it. She's always pushing the boundaries for growth. She never accepts no as the final answer and lives life as if there is no tomorrow. If you spend time with her as a client, a colleague, or just a friend, which you will be after today, she'll likely challenge you to push your boundaries and step outside your comfort zone. And I know that from personal experience. Kyle Case will be our next speaker. He's a much sought after speaker on active aging. I've known Kyle for a number of years, and the more I know him, the more I understand his passion for what he does. He has spent his career managing world-class multi-sport competition for tens of thousands of athletes from all around the world. He's currently the CEO of the Huntsman World Senior Games, which is the largest annual multi-sport event in the world for athletes age 50 and over. He leads a team that welcomes over 11,000 athletes to St. George, Utah, every October to participate in their choice of over 35 different sports. In addition, Kyle has taught university courses and is the host of a weekly podcast called the Huntsman World Senior Games Active Life, where he covers all aspects of active aging. Our final speaker today, who was also our keynote speaker last night, is Kenneth Lichstein, a professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Alabama. I was here for his keynote last night where he talked about the data and the treatments for different kinds of insomnia, particularly later in life. And I just want to say that last night was one of the best uninterrupted night's sleep I've ever had. So, well, I'm not going to lie, I did close my eyes briefly during the talk, but I'm talking about when I was in bed last night. I honestly, I had a great night's sleep. His personality, his data, his research, his information, I guess just put my mind at ease. Not that I have problems with insomnia, but I'm just saying, last night was a really good night's sleep. He served as chair of the department at University of Alabama and previously served as director of clinical training at the University of Memphis. He's a fellow of the American Psychological Association, which, by the way, I curse the APA every time I have to do a bibliography for a paper that I write. He's certified in behavioral sleep medicine. His research is focused on sleep with an emphasis on psychological processes in late life insomnia, hypnotic dependent insomnia, and comorbid insomnia, and epidemiology of sleep. Professor Lichstein's research was supported continuously from 1988 to 2015 by the National Institute on Aging the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the National Institute of Mental Health, private foundations, and industry. He's published over 200 articles, chapters, and co-authored or co-edited 6 books. He's the founding editor of the journal Behavioral Sleep Medicine and was a member of the founding board of directors of the Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine. Professor Lickstein was the 2017 recipient of the Peter Howey Career Distinguished Achievement Award from the Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine. So please extend a warm welcome to our speakers, and Kelli, you're up.
Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Good. It was such a pleasure to meet so many of you last night, and it's, for me, such a joy to see so many people be compassionate people. Not only be compassionate, but passionate about what you do and what you're studying, and it's very exciting to be speaking with these 2 gentlemen today. In 2015, I was hired by a company in southern Utah to embark on a 3-pronged project. The project first was to start a company called the Center for Active Aging. The second piece of that was to enlighten and educate our rapidly growing senior population, which has not slowed down, about the term neuroplasticity. And I didn't know anything about neuroplasticity when I was hired. The owner of the company gave me 6 weeks, a lot of resources, and said, go home and learn. And when I came back, we opened the business. This was all in response to the media, which we noticed was telling our seniors that if they retired and if they hit a specific age, they were going to get dementia. And none of us believed that that was the truth. The third prong was for me to play computerized brain games with a minimum of 500 senior patients associated with the audiology company that I was working for, and collect data from the engagement with these patients. The program was designed to be only 8 weeks long, with only 2 very simple requirements. 1 15-minute session with me each week, could be one-on-one, one-on-2, or in a group setting, depending on what they chose, and 15 minutes a day on an iPad playing a brain game called Brain HQ, which was self-modulated. It would adjust based on your daily performance. If you didn't do well one day, it would adjust. If you did great one day, it would adjust and challenge you a little more the next day. This, of course, was free to the client playing, and they actually got to take home the iPad and play at home for those 15 minutes per day. It was a pretty simple program, really based on long-term studies. Although this was considered an in-house research project, and it was funded in total by the owner of this audiology company, I have to tell you that I don't consider myself a researcher. My degree is in English education. I love science, and I just fell into this. I think it was my personality. And as Ron would say, my fun personality. I have a way of engaging people. But I do consider myself an observationist, which all of those of you who are using Grammarly, you won't find that in the dictionary. But I believe myself to be an observationist because I recognize, as people were going through this program, that there were some outside pieces that weren't necessarily part of the research that were critical components to how they were functioning on a daily basis. So when the participants started to get frustrated, the thing that I heard was, I feel stupid. I can't. And truthfully, I watched as their self-efficacy completely shattered. It's hard to do new things, and it's especially hard to do new things as you're aging. So, fast forward 2 months, the project, as we were doing it, we had already had a very large group drop out of the project. They would just walk in, hand me the iPad and say, I can't do this, I feel stupid, this isn't working. I thought, okay, so how did we set this up and why is this failing on such a large basis? So we had committed to a full year, more if there was enough interest, to having people come in. Our goal was 500 patients, and in the end, we went 15 months, and I saw personally 880 plus patients. So that tells you how popular this was in our community. But as they were dropping out, my curiosity really, truly got the best of me. So I asked some of the dropouts if they would stick with me for just some personal interviews. I invited them to come to lunch once a week for 4 weeks. I mean, who can say no to a free lunch, right? There is such thing as free lunch. And what we did was we simply sat down and talked. Now, I'm not a provider. I'm not a physician. I'm not a nurse. It's out of my scope of practice to give advice or medical advice, but it appeared to me that there was some common sense missing in this dropout situation in these people. So where the medical providers weren't assisting these people, I asked if they were simply open to new ideas. I wanted to know how we could improve their brain function by working together. And what ensued was an amazing collection of data that was really just observation. It had absolutely nothing to do with my research and simply the idea or concept that we could use common sense in our aging process. So we know that the brain can adapt, and we know that the brain can change, and obviously we call that neuroplasticity, right? As we're younger, our synapses are blowing up and then regrowing as fast as they can grow, and as we get older, that slows way down. So as I observed these folks in their element, it really boiled down to how can we assist them in finding a way to manage what was happening. What I found was the majority of seniors that I was working with, and everyone I worked with was over 60, the oldest person I worked with was 104. And what I found was that these seniors believed that the healthy brain had absolutely nothing to do with their bodies and the health of their bodies. And so playing the brain games for them, they had this misconception that if they played that brain game, it would stave off the D word and they would not get dementia, which is a total fallacy, and we know that. But because they gave up and they failed, they thought they already had dementia. That was kind of a crummy deal, wasn't it? So, I found that there were 6 key things as I spoke to all of these people. 6 key things that I now call the 6 core brain optimizers. And they made a huge difference in how these patients were functioning. The only thing that we required was that these patients were willing to try something completely different and get out of their heads. You will find a bookmark on your seats. It outlines my 6-point lifestyle checklist, and I made this up because we were working with all the people at the Huntsman World Senior Games. And I was seeing in the beginning, I was seeing about 120 people a day. And while I was there, I would talk to every single one of them. They would take the SAGE exam, which we call the mini MOCA. Everybody familiar with that? Some of you? So it's basically a cognitive wellness assessment, okay? It's 4 pages long, it takes them about 15 minutes. Not a big deal. So I created this checklist because these were the things, the common sense things, that seemed to make a huge difference. So I'd like to tell you some stories about people that I saw that I think you'll really appreciate. So in southern Utah, most of the population, both young and old, are chronically dehydrated. And I've always been a huge proponent of hydration, water intake. I learned this early on in my life. And so as an observationist, as a person who was just sitting down and having these conversations, I had a woman walk into the clinic early on into the study. And frankly, I have to tell you, she was so compromised, there was no way I could have even allowed her into the study. She couldn't hold a conversation. She couldn't finish a sentence. She was shuffling and walking with a walker. Her tongue was thick as if she had a stroke, but her intake form didn't say anything about a stroke. We sat down and we talked, and she told me she was desperate to get back to where she was. And I'll be very honest with you, she was literally 1 year older than I am now. And that scared the living daylights out of me. It didn't take me very long to figure out what was happening with this lady. When I asked her about the last couple of years and what had changed, she said, well, I had 2 knee replacements and 2 hip replacements, all within the last 2 years. And I said, okay, let's talk about water. She said, I don't drink water. And I said, why not? She said, I don't drink water because then I have to go to the bathroom. She was super embarrassed about it. I said, wait a minute. So you consciously stopped drinking water because it forced you to get up out of the chair and use the facilities? She said, yes. I stopped right there. I didn't ask any other questions. I said, would you be willing to try an experiment with me? She said, sure. I said, I want you to add 1 bottle of water a day. Now this is a little bottle, but we're talking the 16.9 ounce. 1 bottle of water a day for a week, then come back and see me, and then let's talk again. She came back the next week. She was doing a little bit better. We added a bottle. So now we have 1 bottle in the morning, 1 bottle in the afternoon. Guess what? By week 3, we were holding full conversations. By week 4, the walker was gone. We didn't change anything else. We didn't change her nutrition. We didn't change her exercise other than the fact that she was now getting up and using the facilities. We only added water. Now remember, we're way outside the research portion, so I can do whatever I want at this time. I'm only giving common sense advice. Huge difference. Her son called me about 3 weeks later and said, or it was actually her son-in-law, he said, I've known this woman for the last 2 years, and I've never had an entire conversation with her, and we just had Thanksgiving together, and it was amazing. All because of water. Water is a critical component to the health of our bodies. Our bodies, our physical bodies need at least 70% hydration. 75 is good. But our brains have to have 80% hydration. Now remember, I'm not a doctor, but just think, the neural pathways cannot conduct those chemical signals if they're dehydrated. It just doesn't happen. And synapses cannot regrow and incubate the cells if there's no water in the body or the brain. So it's absolutely critical. Now, you'll notice on your bookmark that there is actually a formula for how much water you should drink. This is where Gary Neeson and I differ. Take your body weight. So if I were my perfect 150 pounds in my dreams, I would have 75%, because I'm going to divide that number, or 75 ounces. I'm going to divide my weight in half and turn that into ounces, and that's how much I need every day for my brain to function optimally. So, anybody think they can do that? Gary says diet, what is it? Diet Coke?
No, just regular Pepsi.
Oh, regular Pepsi. Should count. But I often would tell my senior male patients who would ask, does my scotch and water count? Now I know I'm at BYU. Does my scotch and water count? I would say, yes, it counts. After you drink the scotch and water and the ice cube melts. Just saying. Okay, second on the list is nutrition. And nutrition is an interesting thing because we all think we know how to eat appropriately and how eating appropriately is going to make a difference. But I want to tell you a story about a gentleman that walked in my door. He was 72 years old. He walked in and he said to me, I have a fuzzy head. And I said, okay, explain that to me. He said, I can't concentrate on anything. I'll look at the computer and go cross-eyed. He complained of memory loss. He complained of the inability to think straight or make good decisions. And that was the thing that really bothered him, was the fact that he was not making good decisions. So, of course, I asked first about the water, and he said, ugh, I hate water. I said, well, what are you drinking each day? He said, 4 44-ounce Diet Mountain Dews. And I pretty much did that. And then I said, all right, now let's talk about food. He said, well, 10 years ago when the last child moved out of the house and took the grandkids with, my wife stopped cooking. Now this is an extreme story, but this is not a single extreme story. He said, my wife stopped cooking 10 years ago, so we eat out each day. I said, all right, tell me what you're eating. He said, I buy breakfast on my way to work. His company had been bought out by Wells Fargo, so he was still working. He said, I pick up lunch for the staff at lunch, and I call on the way home, and I pick up whatever she wants me to pick up. He said, so you're eating out 5 days a week, 3 meals a day? And he said, no, I'm eating out 7 days a week. 3 meals a day for 5 days, 2 meals a day for 2 days. Okay. Respecting our time today, and because I'm not a nutritionist, I just want to say one thing. Fresh food, fresh veggies, healthy fats. It will make all the difference in your brain and the brains of the people you're working with and the people that you love, your families. My mantra is eat healthy, live healthy, and it's the truth. Often when I'm in the Huntsman World Senior Games doing cognitive wellness screenings, people will walk in and they will completely bomb that little SAGE exam. And I'll ask, are you hydrated? Most of the time they're not. Are you eating out all of your meals, or are you trying to bring some food with you? And often they'll tell me I'm eating out, which we may need to work on. And number 3, they are exhausted, which Dr. Winston is going to talk about. Because exhaustion plays a huge role in this. All right, next thing on the list is physical activity and daily movement. We now have 30 years worth of studies that have concluded that the absolute best thing we can do for our brains is to get up and move. Brain games are awesome, but the only thing a brain game does for your brain is stimulate intuition, not intuition, but intellectual function. That's it. That's all it does. So we've practiced, we've played brain games. How many of you know people who think that because they play Scrabble, or they read, or they play games with others, not like time waster games, but real brain games? How many of you know people that do that? Okay, this is not going to help. It's just keeping them sharp, but it's not going to help their brains to be healthy. We have to move. We have to stretch. We have to move the blood through our bodies to get oxygen into our brains, because when we do that, movement is the clincher to keep our brains from getting brain bleeds and strokes and other brain infarctions. In fact, an ongoing study for Parkinson's patients at the Mayo Clinic, and I learned this several years ago, and I think this is the most amazing thing, produced repeated results showing that a minimum of 20 minutes of moderate exercise each day changes the production of chemicals in the brain. And something magnificent happens when you exercise. Just 20 minutes a day for the brain. In a Parkinson's patient, it changed their gait, and it assisted them in reducing their anti-anxiety and anti-depression medications. That's huge. If it can do it for a Parkinson's patient, what can it do for us with healthy bodies and healthy brains? So I tell our people that come to the Huntsman World Senior Games, and I'm preaching to the choir, 20 minutes for your body minimum, 20 minutes for your brain minimum, 30 minutes for your body minimum, and it will make all the difference in the world. Now I'm going to let Kyle Case present a stronger case for exercise, no pun intended, but I will say that we have been told that our sedentary lifestyles are worse than smoking. Making a change physically is a lot less difficult than giving up smoking. We know people, and you will be working with people that may not be LDS, they may not be living an appropriate lifestyle, but getting a little bit of exercise is a whole lot easier than giving up smoking. So keep that in mind when you're going out to the world. I always say, park on the other side of the parking lot. Most people don't. Wear your Fitbit and walk 10,000 steps a day. You'd be surprised. You know that's about 3.5 miles? You'd be surprised how it affects your body. Change your brain's trajectory for the absolute better. And I want to tell you one more little story. So we had a gentleman come in, and he was really struggling. And we went through the checklist, and I finally asked him, are you getting any exercise? And he said, well, I used to play basketball. well, what made you stop playing basketball? He said, well, I got 2 knee replacements. All right, that's common. And how long ago was that? 10 years ago. So you're not playing basketball anymore? No. Okay. So what do you do for exercise each day? And he said, well, I walk the dog. I said, how far are you walking the dog? First I said, how big is your dog? Because that makes a difference. He said, well, she's a toy poodle. I said, so how far are you walking the dog? He said, down to the end of the driveway and back so she can go to the bathroom. But that's not exercise. So you'll be surprised how many people are still in their heads about 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Remember that as you're talking to your patients or as you're talking to the elderly with whatever you're going to be doing. They're still stuck a little bit in the past. Help remind them that now is now, and that was then, and 10 years ago is a really long time. I'll speak about sleep briefly because we have the expert right here. What did we call you last night? The father of sleep studies? And I am not, but here are the things that I saw. I can tell you from my experience that patients who participated in our research and they would get less than 6 hours of sleep a day do not function well in any way, shape, or form, no matter what they tell you. I saw brain fog, I saw aches and pains, I saw lack of regeneration, and I often saw a depressive state that I felt really difficult. It was so difficult to classify what they were going through, but what I would tell you is that I at that point, I called it a sense of hopelessness, and many of them voiced the sense and feeling that they just wanted life to end, all because they were sleep deprived. And I'm sure you can speak to this. It's really, really hard to watch them go through that. So we'll let Dr. Lickstein talk about that, but the truth of the matter is we want to assist them in any way we can. Sleep is a critical component. Medication therapy management is next on the list. You'll see it down number 5. And medication therapy management is often overlooked in our senior population. In fact, most people don't even know what it is. And as a community medical educator for the Southern Utah area and working for the largest privately owned community pharmacy west of the Rockies, we have a medication therapy management pharmacist that works for us. And her entire job is to do what I'm going to talk to you about. So there are a couple of interesting things about this. I see a lot of elderly patients on a lot of medications. And when I say a lot of medications, have you ever seen those little punch packs with medications that pop out morning, noon, and night? So I've seen patients on 25 to 30 pills a day, and that doesn't include their supplements. And I see your faces, and yeah, that's exactly how I feel. It's frightening. It's frightening. People that are in their 50s that are on 10, 12, 15 drugs every single day. That's really scary to me because you start taking medications that aren't working for you and then you just have this series of side effects and it's just this awful spiral. So 2 issues present on this subject. First, new prescriptions are often prescribed to take the place of existing medications. But that isn't clear to the patient. So then what do? They go home and they add the new prescription to their daily regimen, and they suddenly go from 3 or 4 to 6 to 8 to 12 to 20 to 25 and 30. So the other thing, and you'll laugh about this, but the other thing is that patients think that they're smarter than their providers, so they self-medicate. They decide what they're going to take, how much they're going to take, when they're going to take it, and it's a nightmare. So here's the thing you need to know, and like I said, most people don't know about this, but my father used to say, I'm taking $500 worth of supplements a month, which wasn't true, but he thought he was being funny. And he would say, I'm spending your inheritance on my health. So he would take all of his medications and then boxes of supplements. And he had absolutely no idea which ones were working and which ones weren't. And I would say, well, Daddy, how do you know which one's working and which one's not? He says, I don't know. But at a certain point, at least 50% of them have to be working for me. And that was his theory. So something most of the senior population doesn't know is that anyone on Medicare taking more than one prescription, okay, this is important, so I'm going to say it again. Anyone on Medicare taking more than one prescription is eligible to have an annual medication therapy review by a licensed pharmacist at no cost, and Medicare will pay for it. That's important. I have seen people go from 25 pills a day down to 3 or 4. And a box full of supplements down to 1 or 2 that are really important. And the most important one is a multivitamin. End of story. So what you want to do is you want to look for a pharmacy that has a dedicated pharmacist that's going to be able to do medication therapy management. It's critical. Not going to happen in a big box pharmacy, and we'll avoid names, but it's not going to happen in a big box pharmacy. And most small community pharmacies only have one pharmacist. So find a pharmacy for you, for your family member, for your clients, for your patients. Find a pharmacy that's going to have someone that's dedicated to this. It will save lives, and more than anything, it'll save these people a lot of money. All right, last on the list is sensory disruption, both vision and hearing. And if you are missing your ability to hear, or your vision is poor, it can wreak havoc on the brain. Now, I'm going to give you an example of something that I think is really important to know. With the advancement of PET scans, we now know that when someone starts to lose their hearing, and if they've had hearing loss for a length of time, and it's different for everybody, but generally it really, really takes effect about year 3. When, if it's not a sudden onset of hearing loss, it's gradual. It happens about year 3 and gets really bad at about year 5. But the truth of the matter is that the auditory sensory system is housed in the temporal lobe. When that starts to go away, and that temporal lobe starts to atrophy, and that's really kind of the simplistic description of what's happening, the frontal lobe takes over. What's the frontal lobe good for? Executive function and emotion control, right? The problem is, it's not made to read lips. It's not made to fill in words. And so the brain starts to destroy itself in a nutshell. And there's a lot of details about this out on the market right now, a lot of research that's been done, but it is really important to get annual visits to the audiologist and annual visits to your optometrist or ophthalmologist, depending on where you are with your vision. It's super important for these folks. Now remember, this was created for these people that, not you guys, you're all students, you're all working in the field, you're all instructors or faculty. This was created for our senior population who is super active, but there are a lot of things that they are missing in their lives. In fact, sometimes those folks will walk past our cognitive screening booth, and they'll look, and they'll go just like this. I don't want to know, because they're scared to death that they have dementia. So today I want to provide you with 1+1 that is absolutely new information and not in your bookmarks. In 2014, a computer game manufacturer who for today will not be mentioned, marketed their product as the key to avoid getting dementia and Alzheimer's. In fact, this company guaranteed that if someone played their game, they could certainly skip the dementia line. Sales skyrocketed. Why? Because the boomers were swayed by the extremely influential marketing, and they would do anything to avoid the D word. What we know now is this: board games, and I mentioned this before, social games, puzzles, computer games, and reading, they are outstanding for intelligence and staying sharp. And they will keep people sharp. Neurons that fire together wire together. We want to be sharp. In fact, that was one of the things that I saw, is that a slowdown in recall for anyone that I was talking to, that slowdown in recall was the thing that got them the most. They were certain that because things had slowed down for them, that they couldn't remember someone's name, or they couldn't remember a word, they had dementia. It's a fear. It's a real fear. None of those are going to help people from getting to not get dementia or not get Alzheimer's. What did I tell you earlier? The most important thing we can do for our brains is take care of our bodies. So, a tiny change, 1 extra bottle of water, a handful of grapes or an apple instead of crackers or cookies, a walk around the block, or even just a walk around the house. And if you can't get up and walk, sit in your chair and move. Just get the blood pumping through your body. Plenty of sleep for healing and regeneration, proper dosing and management of medications, supplements, and vitamins. More vitamins does not mean you're going to be healthier. And finally, annual vision and hearing checkups. These are just 6 simple lifestyle changes. There's no magic pill out there, unfortunately. We have to put in a little work, but these are the simple things that we can do. Mr. Hager.